puzzled. The nurse rechecked the chart, certain there'd been a mistake. "Mrs. Cameron, you just had major hand surgery 6 hours ago. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is your pain?" Jo Cameron looked up from the magazine she was reading, confused by the question. "Pain? There isn't any." The nurse forced a polite smile. "It's okay to be honest. We can give you something stronger if you need—" "No, really," Jo interrupted, cheerfully flexing her bandaged hand. "I feel perfectly fine. Bit of pressure maybe, but no pain at all." The nurse glanced at the surgeon, Dr. Devjit Srivastava, who was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, staring at Jo like she was speaking a foreign language. Because here's what Jo didn't understand. The surgery she'd just undergone involved cutting through layers of tissue, severing nerve endings, and stitching her hand back together. Most patients would be begging for morphine by now. Some would be crying. Many would be unable to move. Jo was reading a home improvement magazine and asking when she could go home. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. And when Dr. Srivastava started digging into her medical history, he realized this wasn't the first time Jo had done something impossible. She'd given birth twice, describing it as quite pleasant. She'd undergone a hip replacement with minimal painkillers, walking within hours. She'd burned herself on hot stoves, sliced her fingers while cooking, and once didn't notice she'd broken her wrist until days later when someone pointed out it looked swollen. For 65 years, Jo Cameron had lived a life that defied one of the most fundamental experiences of being human. She couldn't feel pain. Not a little pain, not manageable pain. Zero. Nothing. Ever. And when scientists finally discovered why, they realized Jo wasn't just a medical curiosity. She might be the key to curing pain for millions of people. But first, they had to figure out how someone could live an entire lifetime without noticing they were different from everyone else. Jo Cameron spent 65 years thinking everyone else was just being dramatic. When her friends complained about headaches, she figured they were exaggerating. When women described labor as the worst pain imaginable, Jo quietly wondered what all the fuss was about. And when her husband moaned about his aching back after gardening, she assumed he was just weak, sensitive. She didn't know, because to Jo, pain was this vague concept other people talked about, like trying to explain color to someone who's been blind since birth. She grew up in the Scottish Highlands, rugged, rural, the kind of place where people prided themselves on being tough. So when young Jo skinned her knees climbing trees and didn't cry, adults praised her for being brave. When teenage Jo broke her arm falling off a horse and calmly drove herself to the hospital, people called her stoic. When adult Jo burned her hand on a hot pan and only noticed when she smelled her own flesh cooking, people started calling her weird. But Jo didn't think she was weird. She just thought everyone else was a bit dramatic. She lived a normal life, married, had 2 kids, worked as a teacher. She was known in her village as the perpetually cheerful woman who never seemed stressed, never seemed worried, never seemed to have a bad day. And honestly, she didn't. Jo described herself as permanently happy. Not the forced Instagram quote kind of happy, but genuinely, effortlessly content. She didn't get anxious before big events, didn't feel fear when things went wrong, didn't spiral into worry when life got complicated. Her friends were jealous. Her family thought she was just naturally optimistic. No one suspected her brain was physically incapable of processing those emotions. The clues were there, though, scattered throughout her life like breadcrumbs in a medical mystery no one was paying attention to. Like the time she gave birth to her first child. The midwife kept asking if she needed an epidural, and Jo kept politely declining, thinking the contractions were uncomfortable, but not unbearable. After delivery, when the nurses congratulated her on being so strong, Jo was genuinely confused. Was it supposed to hurt more than that? Or the time she was in a minor car accident and fractured her wrist? She noticed her hand looked a bit puffy, but figured it was just bruising. It wasn't until a week later, at a routine checkup for something else, that an X-ray revealed the bone had been broken the entire time and was already healing. She'd been driving, cooking, typing, living her life with a broken wrist and never noticed. But the moment that finally unraveled everything happened when she was 65 years old. She developed a problem with her hand, severe arthritis that required surgery. Nothing life-threatening, just painful. Except it wasn't painful, not to her. The surgeon warned her recovery would be rough, prescribed heavy-duty painkillers, told her to take it easy for weeks. Jo smiled, nodded, and threw the pills in a drawer. 6 hours after surgery, she was sitting up in bed, cheerful and chatty, asking the nurses about their day. And that's when Dr. Srivastava realized something was very, very wrong. Dr. Devjit Srivastava had performed hundreds of hand surgeries in his career. He knew what normal looked like. This wasn't normal. Patients who'd just undergone the procedure Jo had would be in agony. The surgery involved cutting through skin, muscle, and connective tissue, nerve-dense areas that send pain signals screaming through your body like a fire alarm you can't turn off. Most people needed morphine. Some needed more than morphine. Jo needed nothing. She wasn't gritting her teeth, wasn't white-knuckling the bed rails, wasn't doing that thing patients do where they say, "I'm fine," through clenched teeth, while their vitals tell a different story. She was actually fine. Srivastava pulled up her chart and started reading. That's when he noticed the note from her hip replacement surgery 3 years earlier. Patient required minimal post-operative pain management, discharged early due to rapid recovery and lack of discomfort. He flipped back further. Childbirth, declined epidural, reported labor as not too bad. Multiple minor burns and lacerations over the years. Patient consistently reports no pain. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern. Srivastava called Jo back into his office. "Mrs. Cameron, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course," Jo said, smiling. "When was the last time you felt pain? Real, sharp, undeniable pain?" Jo thought about it, and thought about it, and kept thinking. I'm not sure I know what you mean." Srivastava felt a chill run down his spine. He ran tests, nerve conduction studies to make sure her pain receptors were working, reflex tests to check her nervous system, blood work to rule out rare conditions. Everything came back normal. Her nerves were fine. Her reflexes were fine. Her body was structurally identical to everyone else's. But when he took a pin and lightly pricked her arm, something that should have made her flinch, Jo just looked at it curiously. "I feel that," she said, "but it doesn't hurt. It's just pressure." He pressed harder, drew a tiny drop of blood. Still just pressure. Srivastava sat back in his chair, staring at this cheerful 65-year-old woman who had just rewritten everything he thought he knew about pain. And he realized, if Jo's body couldn't feel pain, there had to be a reason. Something genetic, something biological, something no one had ever seen before. He picked up the phone and called the only people who might be able to solve this mystery, the geneticists. When researchers at University College London first got Jo's blood sample, they expected to find something. A rare mutation, maybe. A quirk in her nervous system. Some genetic anomaly that had been documented before. What they found instead was unprecedented. They sequenced her entire genome, all 20,000 plus genes, looking for anything unusual. And there it was, buried in a region of DNA that scientists had previously labeled as junk, a gene called FAAH-OUT. Now, here's where it gets wild. For years, scientists thought large portions of human DNA were useless, evolutionary leftovers that didn't do anything important. They literally called it junk DNA. Turns out they were wrong. FAAH-OUT wasn't junk. It was a regulator, a genetic switch that controlled another gene called FAAH, which produces an enzyme that breaks down anandamide. Stay with me, because this is where it gets mind-blowing. Anandamide is your brain's natural version of cannabis. It's a chemical your body produces to regulate pain, mood, memory, and anxiety. It's why you feel good after a run, why you feel calm after a massage, why you feel relief when pain finally stops. But here's the problem. Anandamide doesn't stick around long. Your body produces an enzyme, FAAH, that breaks it down quickly, keeping everything balanced. Jo's body couldn't do that. Her mutation in FAAH-OUT meant her FAAH gene was permanently dialed down. So, anandamide just accumulated, built up, flooded her system 24/7. It was like her brain was constantly high on its own natural painkillers, except she'd been born that way. So to her, it was just normal. The researchers were stunned. They ran the tests again, checked her DNA against global databases, compared her results to thousands of other people. No one else on Earth had this exact mutation. Jo Cameron was literally one of a kind. But here's what makes this discovery so important. FAAH-OUT wasn't just controlling pain. It was controlling fear, anxiety, depression, memory. Jo didn't just have a high pain tolerance. She was biologically incapable of suffering. And when scientists started to understand the implications of that, they realized Jo wasn't just a medical curiosity. She was a potential cure. Here's the thing nobody tells you about pain. It's the reason you're still alive. Jo Cameron's life sounds like a superpower, right? Never feeling pain, never feeling anxiety, living in a permanent state of calm and happiness? But let me tell you what that actually looks like. Jo once leaned her entire hand on a red-hot oven coil while reaching for a pot. She only noticed when she smelled burning flesh. By the time she looked down, her palm was covered in third-degree burns. She didn't feel a thing. Another time, she was gardening and sliced her hand open on a piece of broken glass. She kept working, wondering why the soil was turning red, until her husband pointed out she was bleeding everywhere. She hadn't noticed. She's broken bones and not realized it. Suffered infections without the fever and pain that usually signal something's wrong. Developed arthritis so severe it required surgery, but only discovered it when her hand stopped moving properly. Pain isn't just suffering. Pain is information. It's your body screaming, "Stop! Something is wrong. Fix this now." Without it, you're flying blind. Doctors explained it to Jo like this. Imagine driving a car with no dashboard, no speedometer, no fuel gauge, no warning lights. You might feel free at first. No annoying beeps, no stressful alerts. But eventually, you're going to run out of gas in the middle of nowhere, or blow the engine, or crash, because you had no warning. That's Jo's life. And it's not just physical pain. Remember how I said her mutation affected fear and anxiety too? Jo doesn't feel fear. Not in a she's brave way. In a her brain literally cannot generate the emotion way. She doesn't get nervous before big events. Doesn't worry about her kids. Doesn't feel that pit in your stomach dread when something goes wrong. Sounds amazing, right? Except fear is also information. Fear is what stops you from walking into traffic, from trusting the wrong people, from making dangerous decisions. Jo had to train herself, consciously, intellectually, to recognize danger because her body wouldn't do it for her. She's happy all the time, yes. But she's also had to accept that her experience of being human is fundamentally different from everyone else's. She doesn't feel the highs of relief after pain ends because she never felt the pain to begin with. She doesn't feel the joy of overcoming fear because she's never felt fear. She lives in a flat line of calm, pleasant but emotionally muted. And yet, despite all of that, scientists believe Jo's mutation might be the key to helping millions of people. Because if they can understand how her body blocks pain, they might be able to replicate it. When researchers finally scanned Jo Cameron's brain, they weren't looking at a person. They were looking at a cure. Brain imaging revealed something extraordinary. The regions responsible for processing pain, areas that light up like Christmas trees in most people when exposed to heat, pressure, or injury, barely flickered in Jo's brain. It was like watching a city with all the sirens turned off. But here's what was even more interesting. Her brain was flooded with anandamide, that natural bliss molecule I mentioned earlier. Most people's brains produce anandamide in short bursts. A quick hit of calm after stress, a brief moment of relief after pain. Then enzymes sweep in and break it down, resetting everything to baseline. Jo's brain never reset. Her anandamide levels were permanently elevated, not because she was producing more, but because her body wasn't breaking it down. It was like having a natural morphine drip running 24/7. And this is where it gets exciting for science. Right now, pain management is a mess. Opioids are addictive and deadly. Over-the-counter painkillers destroy your liver and stomach. Nerve blocks wear off. Nothing works perfectly, and everything has side effects. But Jo's body had found a way to block pain naturally, using chemicals her own brain produced. If scientists could replicate that, if they could create a drug that mimics what Jo's mutation does, they could revolutionize pain treatment forever. Imagine chronic pain patients finally getting relief without addiction, surgery patients recovering without opioids, cancer patients living without agony, people with nerve damage regaining quality of life, all because of one woman in Scotland who never knew she was different. Clinical trials are already underway. Researchers are developing drugs that target the FAAH enzyme, trying to artificially create what Jo's body does naturally. Early results are promising. But here's the catch. They have to be careful, because as much as Jo's life proves that blocking pain is possible, it also proves that blocking pain comes with risks. Jo Cameron still lives in the Scottish Highlands. She still gardens, still cooks, still moves through life with that same effortless calm that baffled doctors for 65 years. But now she knows she's different, and she's okay with that. She's been interviewed by scientists, featured in medical journals, and studied by researchers around the world. Her DNA is being analyzed in labs across the globe, her mutation pored over by geneticists, trying to unlock the secrets her body holds. And through it all, she's remained exactly who she's always been: cheerful, unbothered, and perfectly content. When asked if she wishes she could feel pain like everyone else, she shrugs. I suppose it would be useful sometimes, but I can't miss what I've never had. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Pain is suffering, yes, but it's also survival. It's information. It's what makes us careful, cautious, and aware. Jo's life proves that we can exist without it, but at a cost. She doesn't feel pain, but she also doesn't feel the relief of pain ending. She doesn't feel fear, but she also doesn't feel the triumph of conquering fear. She lives in a world of muted extremes, pleasant, peaceful, and profoundly different. And as researchers race to turn her biology into medicine, they're learning something important. The goal isn't to eliminate pain completely, it's to give people control over it. Because Jo's story isn't just about a woman who can't feel pain. It's about what pain means to be human. And sometimes the things that hurt us the most are the things that keep us alive. And if you think Jo's genetic mutation was wild, wait until you hear about the man who lived with 90% of his brain missing. And no one noticed until he was 44 years old.